Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This is a book summary of The Untethered Soul. The Journey Beyond Yourself. By Michael A. Singer. Do you know what's keeping you from achieving your full potential, realizing your goals and dreams, or changing your circumstances? You may attribute the negativity to outside influences, but in reality, it's usually your own inner critic who is to blame. In Michael A. Singer's bestseller and meditation guru The Untethered Soul, he encourages us to take a look in the mirror and see ourselves as we really are, not as we appear to others. To some extent, we'll mutter about how we don't understand certain people when they do things that disappoint or hurt us. The New York Times bestseller provides deep philosophical theories on life, the self, and our minds. According to Singer, a major source of our emotional and mental distress stems from our inability to comprehend who we are on a fundamental level. In order to get rid of the emotional baggage we carry around, we need to examine ourselves from the inside out. The ego and the mind are the two things that hold us back. An understanding of one's true nature will enable us to deal with difficulties in life more rationally. This overview is intended to serve as a brief introduction to the process of awakening one's spiritual nature, as well as tools for embracing positivity and accepting one's own shortcoming. Using examples from his own life, Singer explains why we tend to focus on the worst-case scenario, why we get caught up in our own fears and doubts, and why we believe we're doomed to failure before we've even begun. With his guidance, we can learn to examine our thoughts and emotions critically, as well as to reevaluate the way we deal with negative emotions. Facing the existential crisis is made easier by the untethered soul's emphasis on what we can change, rather than on what we can't change. Who am I? Is a question you've probably asked yourself at some point. At some point in our lives, many of us will ask ourselves this question. However, have you ever taken the time to really examine who you are as an individual? When you meet someone for the first time at a social event, how do you approach them? It's easy to say, "Hello, my name is Nancy and I work in sales." But is this really how you introduce yourself to others? Self-understanding cannot be achieved by reducing ourselves to a moniker and a job description. According to William Shakespeare, what's in a moniker? While our names are important and significant to us, they have no bearing on our sense of self. If we take a relational approach and believe that we exist in relation to other people and the objects around us, then our sense of self is defined by our relationships. The truth is that even if those things are taken away, all that remains is for us to be bored and lonely. The subject-object relationship is a term used to describe that. Despite the fact that we have feelings and emotions towards the people and things around us, we remain separate from them. Could it be that our thoughts determine our sense of self? However, Singer argues that ourselves are not our thoughts, and that we are more than the sum of our thoughts. Again, we can see why this is the case by examining the subject-object relationship. Like our emotions, our thoughts exist outside of us. As an example, consider a time when your thoughts are at their sharpest. When you're bored or alone, you're more likely to pay attention to your thoughts. We often don't have time for our thoughts when we're preoccupied or surrounded by other things to do. As a result, we are not our thoughts. For us, we've discovered that we aren't the sum total of our individual selves, which are defined by how we create our identities and how we perceive ourselves. As Singer points out, we are our own consciousness. The only thing left after removing identity and internal factors is awareness. Hello, is this me you're looking for? Say hello while closing your eyes. In your mind as you say that, what is going on? You may have heard a hello from within, or you may have had other concerns about your sanity rattling around in your head. Whatever the case may be, when we examine our thoughts closely, our minds are never silent. In the same way that we have a roommate, we have an inner voice or voices. It's also a good idea to have a set of rules in place for all roommates. As much as we rely on our inner voice for guidance when making difficult decisions, it isn't always helpful. On the contrary, our inner voice frequently keeps us from fully experiencing the present moment and all that it has to offer. When we're trying to live our lives and find peace, our inner voice is often a distracting influence that leaps into action. It constantly nags us to make sure we don't forget important details, such as whether we left the iron on or whether we have milk in the house. It would be great if we could remember to lock the door and to remind ourselves that your mother's birthday is the following week. Everything that keeps us from fully engaging with the world around us is a part of our inner voice. Often, our minds worry about things that never actually happen. This is the most frustrating aspect of our inner voice. Worrying about things that don't happen or are mere coincidences causes us a great deal of stress and anxiety. What we've learned is that not only do we need the ability to control our thoughts, but we need to be more critical of what's happening in our heads. One of the most important things we can do to truly grow is to accept that we don't have the voice of our mind, but rather, we are just the one who hears it. Once we realize this, we'll be able to examine it more objectively. Delete, modify, and adjust. The force that runs through us is known as energy. Although it may sound like a plot point from Star Wars, this book's central tenet is a lot like that. We can't live up to our potential if we're constantly distracted or encumbered, so we need to get rid of anything that's preventing us from doing our best. The more negative thoughts we think about ourselves, the less likely we are to get things done. Qi is the term used to describe the life force that flows through us in Chinese culture. When we have negative thoughts and feelings, our qi can be out of whack. While the outside world cannot be controlled, we can control our inner world, which will allow us to experience greater energy and enlightenment. In order to better understand how we handle our negative emotions, we use the metaphor of a thorn. There are two ways to deal with a thorn in your finger. If you don't want to remove the thorn, you have two choices: remove it or ignore it. Option 1 involves removing the thorn, which is painful at first but eventually heals. It's possible that the discomfort you're feeling isn't as bad as you thought it would be. The thorn can also be ignored. If you choose to ignore it, you will be burdened with the discomfort, which will only worsen over time. The thorn may even force you to reorganize your life, preventing you from doing many of the things you enjoy. Both options are available to us when faced with adversity in a similar way. We can either get rid of the thing that's causing us pain, or we can reorganize our lives around it. Removing a band-aid is compared to dealing with pain and suffering. If we choose to put up with negativity and toxicity, it drains our energy and saps our motivation. In addition, being able to quickly identify and respond to our emotions is essential if we are to deal with them effectively. It's human nature to try to suppress our negative emotions, but doing so only makes things worse. Taking charge. More control is possible in a few ways. Managing our emotions as they arise has been discussed, but it's also important to take a look at our expectations. The way we perceive the world is influenced greatly by our preconceptions. Things that are out of our control are impossible for us to control, no matter how hard our minds try. When it comes to dealing with your expectations and emotions, start small and then work your way up gradually. Being late, getting stuck in traffic, or dealing with bureaucracy are just a few examples of things we'll have to deal with at some point in our lives. There are two options: we can let these things drive us to rage and frustration, or we can look inward and find a way to deal with them. We can better prepare ourselves to deal with more traumatic and difficult situations if we get used to dealing with the minor irritations of everyday life. We're all going to have to deal with major life events that cause us to feel utterly distraught. We'll be better prepared to deal with trauma and turmoil if we accept that they are inevitable. The sooner you realize that you can handle these issues, the sooner you can begin to enjoy life without worrying about how and when things don't meet your expectations. The greatest teacher is death. Death is one of life's certainties, but it is also a subject about which we are frequently unsure. We're afraid of it, so we ignore it and don't bring it up very often. Despite the fact that we may be aware that each passing day brings us closer to death, we tend to ignore this fact. Most of us pretend to accept that it's inevitable, but we're afraid to face it. We're in a constant state of denial because we're afraid of death. It's here, according to Singer, that we're going astray. Because of death, we can learn and become better people. We can learn a lot from death. Accepting death as a fact of life and a constant reminder to be present in the moment is a powerful motivator to do everything we can to make the most of each day. We can only act and live in the moment if we accept that life is temporary. If we take death into consideration, we can no longer rationalize our actions or harbor guilt over the things we haven't done. Because we die alone, death is referred to as the great equalizer. We got rid of everything we owned. When we keep this in mind, we become more aware of what is truly important in life. The message is that we can better assess what we value in terms of decisions, time, and relationships if we accept death and learn from it. In the end, in order to move forward, we're often told to let go of our fears. Because fear is self-created, the sooner we realize this, the easier it will be to rid ourselves of unnecessary anxieties and worries. Our inner voice is running amok, and the untethered soul teaches us how to distinguish between real and imaginary fears. We can't completely eliminate fear from our lives, but we need to pay more attention to it. This is the goal of enlightenment. Taking a step back and paying attention to what's going on in our heads is the first step toward a more positive and meaningful life. We learn not to define ourselves solely by our thoughts and feelings in this book. Jealousy, anger, or anxiety aren't who we are. We are the sum total of our thoughts and feelings. Self-awareness will open us up to a wide range of new experiences and possibilities. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could clear out our minds of all the unnecessary clutter and free up space for new and exciting experiences? Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.